Captain Ethan Cross stood at the edge of the outpost, his gaze fixed on the horizon. The sky over Vontera 3 was a bruised purple, streaked with flashes of orange from distant explosions. The war between the Mirkin and the Ztari had been raging for months now, but the human peacekeeping mission had only just arrived. Cross didn't need to look at the battlefield to know the situation was dire. The sounds of combat echoed from the distant plains, a steady rhythm of artillery fire, the mechanical whine of American war machines, and the eerie clicks of Ztari swarm tactics. Around him, his team of peacekeepers were preparing for evacuation operations. They were a mixed crew, each from different species, their faces drawn with exhaustion. The Myrican were brutal, giants engineered for war, their grotesque forms terrifying in the open. The Ztari, on the other hand, were intelligent and deadly in ways the humans found hard to comprehend, swarming, calculating, and relentless. Cross didn't flinch when another blast rocked the ground beneath his boots. His eyes remained steady, the corners of his mouth turning ever so slightly upward. He was used to this, used to the noise, the carnage, the unrelenting pressure of warfare. But the aliens, even the seasoned soldiers, were not. He heard the murmurs behind him. One of his soldiers, an alien named Jorax, a member of the Ander species, was muttering under his breath. How does he do it? Jorax's voice was a mix of awe and fear. How does he just stand there so calm? Cross didn't respond. He didn't need to. The truth was simple. Humanity's survival had always depended on adaptability, on overcoming fear. On Earth, humans faced constant threats, from massive predators, volatile ecosystems, and endless challenges that demanded ingenuity, tenacity, and above all, the ability to keep moving forward despite it all. A loud screech tore through the air. The Ztari had found them. "Form up, team," Cross said quietly. "Stay sharp." As his crew scrambled to their positions, Cross simply stepped forward into the chaos, his resolve unwavering. The storm was coming, and he would face it head-on, without hesitation. The jungle of Vontera 3 was alive with danger. Dense foliage clawed at their limbs as the team trekked through the underbrush, every step muffled by the damp earth. The air hung heavy with moisture and the scent of alien flora, pungent and unfamiliar. In the distance, the low hum of Myrican artillery vibrated through the ground. But here, in the thick of the jungle, it was impossible to tell whether the danger was imminent or hours away. Captain Cross led the way with calculated precision, cutting through the thick vines and tangled branches with swift, practiced motions. His movements were almost mechanical, instinctive, as though the planet's hostile environment was as familiar to him as the streets of Earth. The others, struggling to keep pace, moved with less confidence. They were a hodgepodge of soldiers and civilians, aliens and humans, forced together by circumstance, and none of them had the same kind of unshakable poise as their captain. How can he just ignore everything? Rachel Diaz, the young human soldier, whispered to Jorax as they followed the captain. She glanced over her shoulder nervously, hearing the distant crack of branches snapping. Doesn't he feel the weight of all this? Jorax, his six-limbed body shifting effortlessly through the dense growth, shook his head. Humans are strange. You would expect fear, but no. He's always like this. Calm. It's unsettling. Rachel couldn't argue. Ethan Cross had a way of making chaos seem like a passing inconvenience. The rest of them were constantly on edge, looking over their shoulders, flinching at every new noise. But he simply moved forward, steady and unwavering. The air was thick with the possibility of death, but Cross seemed immune to it. To him, it wasn't fear that drove him. It was the mission. It was the knowledge that survival didn't come from running or hiding, but from confronting the danger head-on. "Keep up, everyone." Cross's voice broke through their thoughts, cutting the silence. "We don't have time to waste." As they pushed deeper into the jungle, the ground trembled beneath them. The Ztari had found them. Again. And this time, They were closer. The jungle fell unnervingly quiet as the team pressed forward. The only sounds the rhythmic hum of alien insects and the soft rustle of their own footsteps. The oppressive silence felt wrong, like the planet itself was holding its breath. Ethan Cross slowed his pace, his sharp eyes scanning the canopy above. He knew this Terry well, efficient, merciless, and above all, patient. They didn't make mistakes. Cross could feel their presence, the unnatural stillness that signaled an ambush was coming. He'd lived through too many encounters with this kind of predatory intelligence, not to sense it in his bones. He raised a hand, signaling for the others to stop. Jorax, the Ander soldier, crouched low beside him. "They're close," Jorax whispered, his multifaceted eyes scanning the trees with precision. Cross didn't reply. His hand rested on the hilt of his pulse rifle, fingers loose but ready. He could already hear the clicking, sharp, chittering sounds in the distance, growing louder. The Ztari were close, too close, closing in from multiple directions. Rachel, who had been keeping her head low, whispered, "We're outnumbered, Captain. What's the plan?" "Stay still. Trust the environment," Cross said, his voice low but firm. A flash of movement to their right caught Cross's attention. He turned just in time to see a pair of Ztari warriors drop from the trees, their sleek, insectoid bodies moving with unnerving speed. Their compound eyes locked onto the team, mandibles clicking in unison. Without hesitation, Cross's hand snapped up, signaling his team to take cover. The Ztari surged forward, their legs skittering over the leaves and dirt, anticipating the humans' retreat. But Cross was already 3 steps ahead. In a fluid motion, he pulled the flare grenade from his belt and tossed it into the clearing, the flash blinding and disorienting the advancing Ztari. "Now," Cross barked. The team opened fire. The Ztari scattered, caught off guard, their flawless instincts faltering in the face of Cross's calculated counterattack. The humans moved as one, responding to Cross's every command. In seconds, the Ztari were routed, retreating into the jungle, but not without leaving their mark. One of the peacekeepers, a young Myrican soldier named Turek, lay injured on the ground. "Keep moving," Cross called, already back on the move, his team falling into step. "We can't afford to stop." And just like that, the ambush was over. The jungle swallowed them whole once more, but the tension remained, thick and palpable. They had survived, but only just. And the Ztari would be back. They always came back. The air felt heavier as they trudged deeper into the jungle. The constant rumble of distant artillery fire was no longer a background noise. It was now a looming presence, a reminder that the battle was closing in. The Myrican war machines had moved into the area, and the peacekeepers were running out of time. Ethan Cross could feel the pulse of the war like a beat beneath his feet, the very ground vibrating with the weight of the impending conflict. "We need to pick up the pace," Cross said, his voice steady, betraying none of the urgency that burned in his chest. Rachel Diaz, a few steps behind, could barely keep up. The oppressive heat and humidity of the jungle were draining, and her breathing was labored. "How much farther, Captain?" she asked, trying to suppress the exhaustion in her voice. Cross didn't answer at first. His sharp eyes were scanning the landscape, constantly on alert. The trees here were dense, their giant trunks twisting upward in a way that almost blocked out the sky. But he knew the terrain. This was no alien wilderness to him. This was Earth, condensed, turned inside out, deadly, beautiful, wild. "We should be there soon," he said after a moment, then added, "Once we hit the clearing, we'll dig in." He wasn't wrong. Minutes later, they emerged from the dense undergrowth and found themselves on the edge of an open field, a perfect vantage point to set up their next line of defense. Cross waved them to move quickly, but as they did, a shadow fell over the field. A massive Myrican warship broke through the clouds above, its engines screaming as it came in low, too low. Its presence alone was enough to shake the ground beneath their boots, and for a brief moment, Rachel felt the full weight of their predicament. "We're not alone anymore," she muttered under her breath. Cross didn't flinch. He was already scanning the surroundings, calculating the angles. "Hold your position. We'll engage when it's close enough." The air was charged, humming with impending destruction. Myrican forces were on the ground now, their colossal forms moving across the field like living mountains. Cross's eyes narrowed, his mind already working, planning the fight before it had even begun. "Get ready," he ordered. The storm was about to break. The Myrican war machines loomed over the peacekeepers like living titans, massive, heavily armored constructs. Their hulking forms seemed to distort the very air around them. The metallic hum of their engines mixed with the thunderous stomp of their feet as they advanced, shaking the ground beneath their boots. It was an awe-inspiring sight, and an intimidating one. But Ethan Cross felt none of the fear that radiated from his team. To him, it was just another obstacle to overcome. The team had taken cover behind a series of jagged rocks near the field's edge, the jungle's dense canopy now a silent witness to the coming battle. Cross crouched low, scanning the terrain with the same precision he had honed on 1,000 different battlefields. He could feel the weight of his team's eyes on him, hope mingling with uncertainty. They were all seasoned fighters, but none of them had the same experience as he did. None of them had lived through the sheer brutality of a Deathworld. Rachel Diaz, her face smeared with dirt and sweat, kept glancing at him. She had been part of the peacekeeping mission from the start, but her youth and inexperience often showed. Her hands were clenched around her rifle, her knuckles white with tension. "How do you do it?" she asked, almost to herself. Cross didn't immediately respond. He was focused, too focused. The Myrican war machines were getting closer, their massive feet crushing the earth with every step. His thoughts were already in motion, analyzing, calculating. "How do I do what?" he asked, his voice a low murmur. "How do you stay so calm?" Rachel's voice cracked slightly. "I mean, look at them. Look at that. How can you just stand there, without fear?" Cross turned his head slightly, meeting her gaze with his intense, unflinching stare. "Fear doesn't help you survive," he said simply. "It only makes you freeze. On Earth, we learned early that if you let fear take over, you die. That's how we survived." Rachel was silent for a moment, the weight of his words settling in. In the distance, the Myrican war machines loomed closer. The ground trembled again, this time with a finality that told them there was no more running, no more hiding. The storm was upon them. "Stay sharp," Cross said, and then, to everyone, "We fight." The command was met with grim resolve. For the first time in days, the peacekeepers felt something other than fear, something they had almost forgotten in the madness of war. It was determination. The jungle seemed to hold its breath. The Myrican war machines crept ever closer, their monstrous silhouettes now just beyond the tree line. Ethan Cross could feel the tension in the air, thick with the weight of the inevitable. The team had dug in, but the odds were rapidly shifting. They had no air support, limited ammunition, and were vastly outnumbered. The Myrican could obliterate them in seconds if they chose to, but Cross had a plan. A desperate, risky move, one that relied on the very chaos of the situation. He glanced over his shoulder at his team, all eyes locked on him. They were waiting for him to give the order, to tell them what to do next. But Cross didn't need to say anything. He already knew what needed to be done. The Myrican were not just a military force. They were a collective. Their hive mind linked their soldiers and their machines in a seamless, terrifying synchronization. If they could sever that link, cause enough confusion, they might be able to turn the tide, but getting close enough to strike without being obliterated in the process. That was the gamble. Cross turned to Rachel Diaz, who was crouched beside him, her face grim but determined. "We're going to split up," he said quietly. "I need you to take the eastern flank with Jorax and Turek. Get behind the war machine on the left. Disrupt its power core. You'll have exactly 2 minutes before their backup systems kick in. Rachel's eyes widened. 2 minutes. 2 minutes, Cross confirmed. That's all we'll get. He looked around at the rest of the team. The rest of you, keep the Mirkan distracted. Focus on the soldiers, not the machines. We're not fighting them head-on. We're making them fight each other. There was no hesitation. Joraks gave a sharp nod, and Trek gripped his pulse rifle tighter. The others, though anxious, trusted Cross implicitly. They had no choice but to follow his lead. As Cross turned back to the war machines, the ground shook again, this time with the rumbling of Mirkan footsteps drawing near. Go, he said. Now. The team scattered, moving with purpose, their plans set in motion. It would be a long shot. Everything was. But Cross knew one thing. If they didn't act now, they wouldn't survive at all. Time was running out. And in war, sometimes all you had was a gamble. The air was thick with tension as the peacekeepers split into their assigned groups. The Mirkan forces were closing in, their war machines towering over the jungle, their metallic bodies gleaming with deadly purpose. Cross could hear the faint hum of their engines and feel the ground vibrate beneath his boots. This was it, the point of no return. If they failed, they would all die in the firestorm that would follow. Cross kept moving, his focus razor-sharp. His heart didn't race, his breath didn't quicken. To him, this was just another mission, another challenge to face. But as he glanced over at Rachel, crouching low behind a tree with Joraks and Trek, he knew they were about to walk into the heart of the storm. They were going after the Mirkan general, the beast responsible for coordinating this entire invasion. The general was a towering titan of bioengineering, a hulking mass of muscle and technology, standing nearly 12 feet tall. Its chitinous body was reinforced with thick armor plating, making it nearly impervious to standard weapons. But Cross knew its weak point, the neural core, the heart of the Mirkan hive mind, a vulnerability only someone with the right knowledge and a bit of luck could exploit. He moved quickly, signaling his team to fall into place. They weren't going for a direct assault. If they tried to engage the general head-on, they'd be pulverized in seconds. Instead, they'd use the jungle to their advantage, drawing the Mirkan soldiers into the open and creating an opportunity for the real strike. In the distance, the Mirkan general and its unit came into view. The war machines were advancing with deadly precision, their heads swiveling as they scanned the area for resistance. Cross held his breath, waiting for the perfect moment. His hands were steady, his pulse calm as he gave the signal to launch the first strike. The plan unfolded in a blur of motion. Pulse rifles cut through the jungle, Mirkan soldiers scattered in confusion, and in the chaos, Rachel's team moved in, stealthy, lethal, and relentless. They reached the general. Time was running out. Cross's heart still beat with that calm, unshakable rhythm as he pulled the trigger on his own weapon, taking down the first Mirkan soldier in their path. The assault had begun. Now, they just had to survive long enough to take down the beast. The world exploded around them. The air was filled with the deafening crack of gunfire, the screech of Mirkan war machines, and the panicked hisses of Steri soldiers retreating into the jungle. The battlefield had become a maelstrom of chaos, but through it all, Ethan Cross remained unshaken. His mind raced as he moved with a precision born of experience, directing his team with calm authority. Rachel Diaz, Joraks, and Trek had successfully infiltrated the Mirkan general's command unit, their actions a blur of silent coordination. The pulse grenade detonated with a sharp crack, severing the neural connection between the general and its army. The beast let out a primal roar, a guttural sound that reverberated through the jungle as the bioengineered titan staggered, its movements jerky and uncontrolled. For the first time in the battle, the Mirkan were vulnerable. Cross's team had caused enough of a distraction, and now the Mirkan were reeling, their forces disarrayed. The peacekeepers moved quickly, firing with deadly accuracy as they dismantled the remaining Mirkan soldiers, one by one. In the distance, the Myrican war machines began to turn on each other, confusion and disorder spreading like wildfire. But the fight wasn't over. The Ztari were closing in, their chittering forms emerging from the dense undergrowth, more determined than ever to claim victory. Cross knew the battle was far from won, but the tide had shifted. His team had done what no one had expected. They had struck at the heart of the Myrican, and now they had the upper hand. The jungle had turned into a battleground of survival, where only the strongest would remain standing. But it was here, on this alien world, that humanity's legacy of perseverance and adaptability came to the forefront. As the last of the Myrican general's forces fell, Cross allowed himself a brief moment of quiet. His eyes swept over the battlefield. His team, bloodied but unbroken. The Ztari might not be finished, but for today, humanity had won. Ethan Cross turned toward his team. The storm still raging in the distance, but for the first time in what felt like forever, there was a sense of peace. "We're not done yet," he said, his voice calm but firm. "But we've earned the right to fight another day." And with that, the Deathworlder walked forward, fearless, as the jungle whispered its silent approval.